Great, thank you. And I think that's also, we know will be our full house for tonight, correct? We're not expecting anyone else.
No, we're not.
Okay, great. All right, I will call the Water and Sewer Board meeting to order. We had a bunch of last minute cancellations, but fortunately we pulled off the quorum by the skin of our teeth. And with that, Brenda, if you will take the roll, please.
Board Member Freeman.
Present.
Board Member Jolie.
Present.
Board Member Kelly.
Present.
Board Member Mercier.
Present.
Board Member Ridley. Councilmember Russell. Councilmember Wright. Mayor Sierra. Vice Chair Boreski.
Present.
Chair Moore.
Present. All right, as I mentioned, that just gives us a quorum. We'll move on to item 4A, the minutes from the September 9th meeting. Can I get a motion to approve?
Motion.
Second from someone?
Second.
All right, any comments, edits to the minutes? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries.
And I abstain.
I
wasn't present at the last meeting, so I abstain. Under Bob's rules.
Do I need to hold the? Is it just a majority of the quorum that we need to pass?
Well, Chair Moore, under Bob's Rules of Order, which has been adopted, not attending the meeting isn't grounds for abstention. So, because you could have reviewed it or seen the meeting previously.
So,
Okay.
Aye.
Perfect. Abstention withdrawn, and all motion carries after all. All right. For item 5, Brenda, do we have anyone from the public to address the board tonight?
We do not.
Okay. Speeding along to item 6A. We have a conflict next month for the meeting with Veterans Day. So I'd like to make a motion. A rare move, I'll do the motion myself. I'd like to make a motion to change the November meeting from November 11th to November 12th at the usual 5 p.m. time. Can I get a second for that motion?
Second.
All right. Any discussions? Any discussion in terms of that date?
I do, Chair. I don't have my schedule in here, so I have no idea if I could make that change for the 12th, but I will let Brandon know once I get home. Yeah.
Thank you. Does it work for the rest of this group? Okay.
Yes.
Let's take a chance. Yeah, we'll do that. And if we, Marjan or others have enough problems, we'll have to find something else, but generally just rolling to the next day proves to be most convenient. So all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, opposed? All right, motion carries. Moving on to 6B, and I believe, Peter, you'll take it?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening. Okay. Sorry, I have to, Chair, I have to turn this back over to Brenda.
I don't recall hearing a second on that motion to move the meeting.
Oh, I made the motion, and the second, I did get it, didn't I?
Yes, I was the second.
Okay.
Apologies.
No problem.
Okay. All right, let me move to. Okay, so the first item tonight is an amendment to amendment number 2 to the Old Hampden Utilities Improvements Project contract for construction, and we'll summarize what this is and what we're requesting from the board. So background: this is the utilities work that is being done in advance of the complete streets work for Old Hampden. This is right near Swedish and Craig Hospitals. You can see the area highlighted in yellow there. It's being project being executed jointly with Public Works, and includes water and storm drainage infrastructure. It is largely funded by ARPA funds, and so this is actually where we've allocated our water ARPA funds. And then, like I said, we're in advance of the next phase of the project, which is the topside work. So what we're looking for here from a contract amendment perspective is a change to the contract that really goes back to the beginning of the contract, which was the scope of this project from a water perspective is it replaces a critical 18-inch transmission main. And when we started that project, it was quickly determined that the work that was put into determining how to protect the overall system during construction wasn't necessarily hadn't really considered the vulnerability of failure. And so we worked with the contract right from the start to work with their methodology to ensure that we didn't take on any unacceptable risk that would essentially put not just Swedish or Craig out of water, but also this is one of those lines that if it breaks and we lose the control of the break, we can actually drain the tanks and drain the system. So it's a vulnerable line, and we wanted to make sure that we were fully sure of their approach to how they were going to make the cuts into this line to the point where we still maintain control of the line. And what we ultimately landed on, and this was direction from us as much as the contractor proposing their approach, which is why the change order is here, is to utilize 3 large insertion valves to ultimately put more measured incremental control as we moved from west to east along this line. That was ultimately what made our operations staff comfortable with the risk associated with this line. And to be fair to the contractor, it was not contemplated to that degree of risk mitigation that we wanted based on the vulnerability of the line and the vulnerability of our system. So it not only resulted in an added scope of these insertion valves, but it also delayed their work on the work while we were trying to figure out what the appropriate methodology and risk mitigation was, as well as it took time to procure those valves and the contractors to install. So what it resulted in is a contract amendment amount of $520,000. And so this work was done way back in February. However, the original proposed contract amendment was right around $800,000. It's actually, I think, a little bit more than $800,000. And so we have been working back and forth with the contractor to negotiate that amendment change order to what we believe is appropriate and fair based on the work that they are required to do under their contract versus extra work that we directed because of that desire to ensure that the system had enough accounted for the vulnerability of this line. So what we're bringing tonight is the request for recommendation to approve that change order amount, that amendment amount, amendment number 2. Essentially, how that looks for the water fund itself is the delay was largely water related because of this, but there was also some additional delays that were related to the project. So the water fund didn't absorb the entire cost of the change order. Some of the other funding sources, most particularly the stormwater fund, will absorb a lesser amount of the cost delay for the project. But ultimately, the water fund amount that we're looking for the amendment for is for $438,000. So the total amount due to the contractor based on the negotiations over the last several months is $520,000. The effect on the water fund is $438,000. You can see below the overall project funding sources. So the ARPA was 2.6, which means 2.466, which means the water fund remaining balance that we have to address this for this project is 438 or 447,000. So that is the request, and I'm open for any questions on that one.
Floor is open.
Peter, I have a question.
Sure.
So, sorry, I don't know. I have some weird echo going on. So has the work already been done?
The work was done way back in March. And so this is one of those situations where we can't stop a project for several months while we negotiate the total change order amount, because the original change order amount was $800,000. And so we negotiated that down to $520,000. But in order to keep the project moving, we kept the project moving. And so that's where we're coming back with this negotiated amendment amount to address what we believe is fair from a contract execution perspective.
Okay, and I guess just my question is, so we don't have the ability to say yay or nay. I mean, the money is spent. So basically, this is an administrative rubber stamp on what you guys have already proceeded with.
Not necessarily,
Okay.
because yes, functionally, it is. Functionally, I think this gets to the point of with construction execution, there are times where there's a disagreement about a project cost or a project scope approach. That every time those disagreements occur, you can't stop the project. You have to keep the project moving forward. And so, in this instance, we kept the project moving forward. A month and a half later, the contractor sent us their amendment for $800,000. We said that's not right. We don't agree with that. At which point, then we went back and forth several times to look at what their contract requirements were versus what we think was a direction of from our perspective. So ultimately, that brings us to here today. The board could say no, at which point likely what that would result in is then we move into some kind of a legal matter between us and the contractor where we end up in court. And so we don't want to operate that way, but I also understand what you're saying as it relates to, there's a certain amount of project execution that goes on where we couldn't bring back if we brought the $800,000 change order, I would have said we would have been paying too much, and that would have occurred right after the work was occurring. We went through this process to be fair in terms of what we think is an appropriate cost versus what they initially proposed as their costs. So ultimately, this does become your recommendation to council and council's approval. This is where we hope that the trust is in staff to actually execute this in the most efficient way for the city, such that when we bring it to you, it is a thing that you can comfortably approve and know that the project timeline and further costs and delays didn't incur because of that timing. It's just somewhat a function of project execution when there's a disagreement about what's in the contract versus what's not.
Any further questions?
I do. I
Go ahead.
don't think I have a question. I have a opinion. Okay, so just from this period of time I've said with the board, I have to kind of piggyback on her concern is that I completely understand your position, Peter, as far as, okay, so you have to balance and you have to manage these very difficult projects, which I respect you for doing all of this hard. But my question is, when does the city actually have to be able to say, because every time a contractor comes and says, okay, like here's our cost, we did the work, we misjudged it as well, the contractor, and we didn't give you a proper price. And then we did the work, and here is the bill. You guys take care of it. I personally prefer to see the contractor take half of the blame and the city take half of the blame. To me, that's a fair deal. I mean, if we had a job that is say, okay, you're also at fault for not being able to, otherwise, then what's the meaning of a contract? What's the meaning of agreement? Because we have to consciously be conscious about how is that money is spent, and I know you are, and please this doesn't come across as, but I think I personally not comfortable with this approving of this, because they get the job done and then they get guaranteed to get paid. To me, it's like, okay, what are you going to do to solve this problem? Not a month after, maybe 2 months before. Once you recognize there's this problem here, I prefer to see that.
So if all construction went that smoothly, I would say that would be the way to do it. And so there is a way that we could have done this. We could have stopped the project, and we could have left that area open for several months with the roads closed, and it continued to incur contractual delays while we sorted this all out and brought it to you for approval. And then once that was approved, then we continue to move the project forward. The challenge with that is that now the cost for delays goes up substantially. And so we're always trying to balance this. We're always trying to balance keeping the project execution, but doing exactly what you said, which is not just agreeing to every contractor's change order that they send to us. But there are certain times when we're in the midst of construction that a change approach occurs. And if we stop and go through if we stop the project entirely, they have to demob. Their workers might not necessarily have other jobs to go on, at which point we in the contract are delay claims that they can charge us. And so why we do it this way is because I agree with you. I don't think $800,000 is the right amount. But $400,000 is also not the right amount, because some of this is our responsibility. And it's because it's the way that once we started digging into the project, that we decided to ensure that we don't drain the system and have a much larger problem for our water system. We directed the contract to take more steps so that we were comfortable with the approach. And so that's the kind of thing we wish would have been caught in design, but it wasn't caught in design. And so and you don't always catch these things in design.
I understand that. Also, so if to me is that if the delay is part of the charge, is part of the contract, so is the agreements of the charge. And I know these things have to go to the court, yes, but to me, that tells me this company is not accountable. I mean, if I was looking at, and I know it's a complex project, but to me, it's like if this company is incapable of making that, and also I like to see somewhere in here that they say, okay, here's a $447,000 charge. We're going to take 20% of that, because we also made a mistake. Also, we don't want to go through delay. Also, we don't want to go through court. To me, that's a fair.
And what I'm saying is the original amount was $800,000.
Right.
And so that's what they proposed to us, was $800,000. And then we went back and forth for months to drive that down to what we thought was an acceptable amount that was fair from our perspective as it relates to what we directed to ensure absolute safety of the system, because one, it's right in front of the hospitals, and two, we know that our system is hard to control because the valves are old and they break. And so our concern is that if they cut into it the normal standard way that you cut into this 18-inch line, that there was the risk that it would result in an uncontrolled opening to the pipe was high enough that we said, we need you to pause and go backwards, because we want more control of this, because this is one of those pipes that if we lose control of it, we drain the system. And then we have a much bigger problem than the amount of these extra valves and this delay, because the system now is without water. And so that's what we're balancing as we're working through the construction. So as As the contractor came back to us and said, well, you caused us an $800,000 delay, we said, no, we don't agree with that. And that's what takes the time, is to go back and forth to ultimately land on something where we are comfortable that this is a fair cost to the city based on our direction and approach to maintain safety of the water system.
So may I ask you, just want to make sure I understand this clearly. So the original price difference that they offered was 800,000, and so you negotiated down to 447.
We negotiated down to 520. So the 448 is just the water fund. The stormwater fund assumes a portion of that as well.
So how many more pipes, or what did you call them? What do you call them? The additional things that you
The
have?
valves.
The valves.
We put in valves.
Okay, the valves. I'm sorry. Thank you. How many more valves are putting there in there, and how much is it per? I mean, I understand it's an 18-inch pipe.
We put 3 of them in. They're $100,000 a piece. That's what they cost to install a live insertion valve on a live 18-inch line. And so it's a specialized contractor. It's a very big specialized valve, and it costs $100,000 a piece. So just in materials, to ensure that we had maximum control of, again, this pipe, that we don't always trust the valves in our system. We've talked about that for years. We asked them to put 3 more valves in.
I think I compliment you on it, and the fact that you're putting valves to control that, because it's a main street, and you said there's a lot of major things in. So visually, what I imagine, here's that 18-inch valve, and so they're putting a valve, a 3-way in there, that it comes up and it possibly give you a physical or digital place for you to be able to shut down the water from that valve, correct?
Yeah, so what this is, so this pipe is under high pressure. It's a main transmission line. It serves a significant part of the city.
Mm-hmm.
So when you dig up a pipe that's been buried for almost 100 years,
mm-hmm.
and you take the soil burden off of it and you cut into it, the idea that it's just going to stop and not cause some kind of reverberating effect where it then fails and collapses the pipe farther upstream was our concern.
Oh.
And so what we did is we put this insertion valve in, because you can do that while it's live.
Mm-hmm.
And so then at that point in time, we know we have brand new control in that location.
Mm-hmm.
And with that brand new control, then we can start going segment by segment, phase by
To
phase,
add the
from
rest
west
of
to
the valves,
east.
yeah.
And so it took 3 of those segmentations as we moved across to ensure that we had control of the system, where we weren't concerned that we were gonna have complete catastrophic loss. That's what we were balancing, was catastrophic loss, because this is such a critical line and it's such an old line. And so then they came to us and said, well, that's $800,000. And we said, we don't think that's $800,000. And so that's where we negotiated down to 520, and we reduced their delay claim in terms of the amount of time that it took them to delay it. However, because we were directing those valves specifically, and that's that type of approach, that's where our direction exceeded what their original design approach was, because we weren't comfortable that their original design approach was going to satisfy a pipe that was this old. That's how we got here. And so now we're here several months later in coming to the Water and Sewer Board to approve this amendment. And I understand the board's frustration, I understand council's frustration as it relates to, well, you're presenting something that we can't really do anything with. The alternative is we stop the project and then we incur much greater costs. And so this is where we work on behalf of the board and council as staff to use our professional judgment and expertise to ensure that what we're providing to the city and the citizens is the most cost-efficient approach to minimize the risk of catastrophic loss and ultimately replace this critical line in front of the hospital.
Ty's got his hand up. Can I have
Oh,
him jump in?
Yep.
Peter, I just had one question. I was curious what your and the city manager's spending authority is, and is this a decision that was made in consultation with the city manager, or is it based the director's decision?
So my authority is 250,000 on budgeted items, and unbudgeted items it's 125. I believe city managers is the same. Is that correct?
Yes, and I believe that that authority, the city manager would be the designee for the city that would be signing at that authority.
Right. Yeah. Ultimately, yes.
Correct.
Yeah. So ultimately, the signing authority does move to the city manager. So this was something that I was as I met with Sean, I was keeping him apprised of the approach that we were taking and the ongoing negotiation with the contractor. I will say that the contractor was not happy that we got down to 520 because in their mind, they're owed the full 800,000 based on their interpretation and understanding of the project. It took several meetings to get to the point where we got to this. And frankly, as I look back and went through that process, I think it has resulted in a fair cost to the city. We ended up with 3 additional control points with these valves, which is a value to this system. And I think that's where we're now bringing you what we think is the appropriate optimal cost as an amendment for that work.
Perfect. And just one follow-up to that, was city council kept in the loop that this was what it was going to shape up to? And do the city's financial policies support this methodology of spend and contract amendment after the fact?
Well, so I believe Sean was keeping them apprised in his one-on-ones, but I can't speak for him. The second thing I would say is there's nothing to say that this has to be approved. I mean, we're taking what we think is the most cost-efficient approach. I would say that if it doesn't get approved, I would anticipate the contractor would sue us for the full $800,000 at that point in time.
And Vicky
Thank you.
can respond, but here's how I look at that. Pieter does not have unilateral authority to have approved this. And so and generally in this stuff, the contract understands if funds aren't appropriated, then there's a problem. So that they also are taking some risk that they're trusting this process. Everyone's being fair actors and good. And at the end of the day, the approvals will come. But I suspect that the contractor understood that the funds had not been fully appropriated, and there's a process, and so they know they're going forward with it produced a little bit of gamble on their part. But again, it goes back to as Pieter's tried to describe the good faith process to keep this stuff moving. And so that's how I look at it. I don't believe that this is an issue that the money was in fact spent without. The formal approval still had yet to come, and we could technically, or council could technically not provide that approval. So again, I think certainly as I look at it, and maybe we should be getting, let me pause here. I want to get the motion and second on the table so that we can more formally discuss it and lead to a vote on it. So can I get a motion for item 6B as written?
I'll move.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All right, and then I'm going to continue the discussion. So I don't think this is a case of stepping out of bounds on the approvals. I also just want to be really clear. I don't believe that this isn't simply a contractor coming back and saying I should have charged more, or I made a mistake and I want to pay you more. I think Pieter's been clear that we expanded the scope of the project, so there was going to be a change order. The debates really were just going to be about the additional price. So this is not holding I've not heard anything that says we're failing to hold the contractor accountable. We decided we needed additional measures taken. And again, the debate is only how much it was going to cost. Not, I don't hear us saying that Pieter saying that we were simply fixing their mistake. So I don't think this is a failure to hold them accountable. And I think also, again, that from a price standpoint, we're hearing staff say they really took the time and effort to try to get as good of a deal on this as we could. Ty, I'll send it back to you.
Perfect. Thank you. I just want to say, first off, I feel like this is a common sense solution to a complex project, complex area with a lot of specific needs, really only related to hospital operations like this. So I applaud staff for coming up with a creative solution. My question for Pieter is, did we look at the potential of bringing a third party in to help price the value of the work?
We did utilize our engineer to validate everything that was brought forward, and then we also had another owner's advisor engineer that we used that also helped to validate. So we ended up with multiple validations of these costs to ensure that we were not that they were fair and appropriate for what the work we were expecting.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I feel much better knowing a third party had a set of eyes on it and was able to kind of validate where the negotiation ended up. So thank you.
Any further questions?
I do.
Go ahead.
So from this map, does all the three valves are in the same yellow highlighted area?
They're within that highlighted area. Yeah, and so we progressed from the west to the east. And so the first one was put in the west, and then we moved farther east, and then we put the second one in, and then we moved farther east, and then we put the third one in.
So would you say that you put one before the hospital and one after the hospital?
We had one on either side of the hospital, yes.
Yeah,
and then ultimately
for
what that does is it actually helps the hospital significantly, because now another contract amendment we made on this was we added a redundant feed to the hospital, because right now the hospital had one feed. And so if this had failed, Swedish and Craig would not have had water for days.
Yeah.
And so that's a critical nature of what we were trying to address here. In doing that and seeing that vulnerability, we added under one of the other change orders a redundant feed to the hospital, which has a valve now on either side of that, so we can isolate, so we can feed from the east or we can feed from the west to the hospital, which adds a tremendous amount of resiliency for the hospital from our system. And so that was another added benefit that came out of our running into this challenge.
Okay, so and forgive my limited knowledge of this, but that makes sense to me. Like if you're putting a valve before and after, which they're going to be a cost for the hospital, correct? So they're going to be part of their.
No, because it's part of our system.
Okay,
so
there's no, but even though the extra act is for the hospital, right? Which is
so it's our distribution network system, and we're providing that so we can feed it from either side, and that's because our system ultimately feeds the hospital. And so we wanted to make sure that if there was some kind of a catastrophic loss on either side of the system, that we could feed from other points.
Different options. Yep. So my failure is to see where is the third one and why. Because to me, it's like, let's say if there is a problem right from this block from the Logan on to Broadway, if there is a problem, you can simply shut off the valve right after the hospital, and then you can do the repair.
The third valve is because as we progressed farther to the east, you had new pipes coming in from the streets that were connecting, and we needed to provide that additional control at that point in time. And so
there's another line coming to that horizontal line. Okay.
So the reason for the control was each time we cut the pipe and we no longer had the downstream back pressure to hold the pipe in place, we wanted to make sure we had a control valve there. And that's why there were 3 that were selected. Exactly where they were selected was based on the hydraulics of the system as we were progressing from east to west. But one of them was definitely around that hospital connection. I think that, and Sheriff, I might add, the last thing I want to say on this is, typically we cover these types of things with contingencies. So when we have a project, we ask for an additional contingency to cover things like this. In this instance, it was such a significant risk to catastrophic loss for the system that it wasn't contemplated during the original contingency and in the system, contingency in the original contract, which is why it's outside the norm. This is not how we normally actually execute these types of things. This is just one of those one-offs of it's a high risk and we didn't want a catastrophic failure, so we made sure that we got the most cost-efficient way to do that.
Thank you. I'd like to go ahead and bring this to a vote, and I'll make the comment that I'll be in support. And I think that, again, this is not as you said, it's not the normal mode of operation, but sometimes things like this are necessary and appropriate and prudent. And I see all those signs here, but can I get all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. Item 6C, still with you, Peter?
Yep. So 6C is our next contract renewal for the lead reduction program management services and construction. And so this project is a multi-year project that we've initiated with. And as you recall, this is our goal to remove all the lead service lines across the city. And we received a significant amount of both federal and state funding to ensure that we can get ahead of this for our community and remove this risk. Ultimately, it is in compliance with the change to the lead regulations that are coming down, coming in the future. And so this is continuing to execute that, what has really actually been quite a successful project thus far. So here's our timeline. We kicked it off in March of 2023. The program itself, and then we worked through getting the funding. That was through the Drinking Water Revolving Fund loan, as well as the bipartisan infrastructure law money, which actually provided us $10 million in principal forgiveness, which is essentially grant money to execute this project. We approved the contract in June of 2024, got going in July, so just over a year ago. And then worked through the first contract amendment. We then also added insertion valves, and so this was a contract change that we brought, which ended up being funded through that Drinking Water Revolving Fund loan. That's the $40 million. You can see we reached that milestone in May of this year of our 1,000th line replaced. We also got ahead. We coordinated significantly with Public Works to ensure that we were out of their paving areas, because the last thing we wanted to do was go through and have them repave everything, make it all nice pavement, and then we come in and cut it up with a bunch of lead service line. We had a couple locations on the north part of town that we didn't quite get those in the right order, but it's half a dozen. So ultimately we restructured based on learning that lesson. We actually restructured our approach such that we were ensuring that we were well ahead of where that mill and overlay work is. And you can see that that's actually being done now. You then move to Broadway. We prioritized Broadway because of the Broadway complete streets deadline. In downtown, this was another one of those areas where it was repaved, and we got in there very quickly ahead of the paving project, and were able to remove at the time the lead lines that we knew and had identified. We think there might be a couple more based on what we learned on South Broadway, but we'll come back and address those towards the end of the project. You can see the additional Clarkson, Maine. So we replaced that. That was in the area where it's in the northeast part of town, and this line actually broke twice. And in breaking twice, it sprayed rocks and debris on the same house twice in a couple of years. And so we came back through and just replaced that whole line. It's an old line, and so we got 600 feet of Clarkson replaced. Ultimately, all of Clarkson is on our list to replace as funding allows. So as we look ahead, this is where we're headed. You can see in November of this year, well, this is generally a map of where we're going. You can see October right now, we're in the northwest part of the city. We're in that northern part of the city for late summer. And then we move to those western areas, and then we move to the south, and ultimately anticipate being done in December of 26. So that just gives you a map of where we've been. All the areas that don't have a checkbox are areas that we've already moved all the way through and cleared out. So our program goals are to replace all the lead and galvanized steel service lines within 5 years. We think we're going to do this in less than 2. The project execution has gone faster than we expected, which is great. Ultimately, what we're seeing is you can see some of the results from our field verification. So we are verifying all properties that are pre-1960, and to ensure that there's not only are we verifying it on the customer side of the line, but we're verifying it right at the connection in the street where the distribution system main is. The reason we're doing that is because over the years, many customers over the last several decades have replaced their line, but didn't replace the last 6 or 8 or 4 or 10 feet that was under the street that connected to the distribution system itself. By potholing at the line, we catch those last remaining pieces of lead service line that would not have shown up otherwise if we tested them at the curb stop or meter pit or at the house itself. And so we've actually found, I believe it's somewhere around 10% of the lines that we found are these residuals that we had not originally expected. And so it's been good because we're able to replace those too and give those customers a brand new line. You can see some of the where we're at as it relates to the properties left to be verified. This is just more some of the data of what we have left in terms of the mapping and verified non-lead versus verified lead versus unknown. So so we had a model that predicted this when we started to try and get an estimate of how many lines we thought there were, and this is the actual information as a result of when we actually went in and potholed and physically verified in the street. And so the north central zone was 5% lower than the model. The central was 5% higher than the model. The central west was actually 27% lower, which was nice to see. And then the south was about 16% lower. So if anything, where that's helpful for us is it ensures that our funding is such that it's encompassing what we anticipated for the project, and in fact is coming under that funding amount. And so what that ends up with is our ability to do things like all the insertion valves that we put on Broadway to be able to control the distribution system along Broadway as we were doing that work. You can remember, if you remember this summer, there's a period where southbound Broadway for a couple weeks had 1-2 block diversions. That's because we were putting valves all the way down the street, and then we came back through and we replaced all the lead service lines for all of the properties along Broadway. And so that those insertion valves were an additional scope that we brought to the contractor, but because our numbers are lower than we had originally modeled when we went after the drinking water fund money, We believe we have around 10 million that's available for exactly this, these distribution system improvements as part of the project. So Hazen Sawyer is our program manager. We have our two key staff from there. Steve Price and Jasmine Gamboa are in the audience. They are essentially helping us execute this because we do not have the internal staff resources to execute a program this big and this complex. And it doesn't make sense for us to staff way up and then staff down when the project's done. So they've been great they've done all the modeling, they've done all the inspection work, they've done the programmatic execution work to help support our in-house staff. Their scope of work is program management, service line inventory maintenance, service line replacement coordination, a lot of public outreach. They've been coordinating and leading the public outreach, and then the regulatory and financial support. So the construction contract was the original contract from the contract from November 2025 to December 2026 was for $12,720,000. That was the progression of the program, that is the progression of the program. That's the request, is to continue continue the construction funding as we move year over year through the program. The scope of work on that is they're physically verifying the lines. We're replacing somewhere around 3,000. Again, we think it's going to come under that 3,000 lead and steel galvanized steel lines. They engage with the customer in situations where we have a lead line where there's an inside meter set pit or there's a flat rate. We install a meter pit for that residence, so we move that meter outside. Or if we're installing the meter, we install that meter in a new meter pit. That's all part of what they do when they put a new service line in. And then they also install a number of insertion valves, and that was the work along Broadway. And throughout the system, I believe they've installed 91 insertion valves, and that has helped us tremendously with control. And so what does that mean? If without these valves, a break affects a large number of customers. With these valves, we have reduced the number of customers that are affected by a break because we know we have brand new points where we can shut the water off. As we went through the process, how did we end up with AGL? This is just some history of how we ended up with them from a construction perspective. You can see their costs were on a per unit basis were the most affordable, and actually they have really executed on this pricing and have really done a great job with it. And so you can see of the contractors that bid, and the reason you see the difference between AGL and AGL update was because we had originally bid for the initial year of the project, and we said, well, what if we just give you the whole program? At which point they brought their costs down because there was an economy of scale there. So that was good for us. We got better pricing. The proposed contract overall with AGL, you can see the initial term and budget and the build amounts, and then ultimately what our request is, which is that $12,720,000. And then the total contract amount you see below is basically $32,800,000. The total amount that we have, and you see at the bottom there, $32.8 million. Minus the $28 million of the total construction contract amount is those additional costs because of those insertion valves and those other contract amendments that we brought before. So ultimately, the funding of this is the $40 million drinking water revolving fund loan fee. And when you look at what we've been able to accomplish thus far, and we still have remaining funds, it's helping us really make a good dent into fixing a lot of the historic problems with our distribution system. So here's a summary of that additional scope. And if you move kind of to the middle, it's the 90 insertion valves installed. So that was $3.5 million. And that's because when you're installing a valve on a live line, they're expensive to do, but they are also they're a game changer for us in terms of being able to control the system. And so that's where you can see the total cost. The bottom one that I'll say that I'll highlight there is AGL had committed to maintaining their contract pricing through the life of the contract. However, that material escalation for copper piping is a direct result of all the things that are going on with tariffs right now, and so we didn't feel it was fair to. They came to us and we said that is reasonable and fair. So it is a reasonable and fair cost, and it's not a lot, but it's definitely fair. So we talked a little bit about the accelerated work schedule to stay ahead of the slurry seal and mill and overlay. So there was some acceleration, and this is where that additional scope was and why we put those 91 insertion valves in. And then we also had we discovered this unique aspect of the South Broadway corridor, and it turns out after we talked to Denver and their program that they discovered the same thing, which according to the county records oftentimes will have a building date that is newer based on whether that property subdivided or redeveloped with a new building. And what we found was that oftentimes, even though it updated the county records updated the date to maybe sometime in the 80s, the original date of the building would have been in the 40s, and the lead service line remained. And so that resulted is we went back through to verify, and we found 20 more. So it was a unique aspect of South Broadway, and talking to Denver, they experienced the same thing on Federal. And so it's with these commercial corridors as properties turned over the course of the year. So that was something we discovered as we were working along Broadway. We think we've addressed them all on South Broadway. We know as a result of that, we're going to have to go back through and verify some of the North Broadway areas because we were going off of that date information. But it's something we're glad we discovered it because it will allow us to replace those lines too. The Clarkson main replacement I talked about, that's where we ended up with that break that occurred twice, the catastrophic, basically that giant spraying fountain of a break. So the construction contract summary, you can see here the proposed contract number 3 is $12.7 million. And so we put a 10% staff managed contingency there of $1.3 million, 1.272 for a total contract authorization of 13.992. Total program authorization is $34 million. Total program funding right now is $40 million. So we're well under the total program authorization. As we identify additional distribution system related work, we will bring back additional contract authorizations, whether it's to AGL or other contractors that goes against this funding source. And that is my presentation.
I'm going to go ahead and ask for a motion in a second and then go to discussion. So could I get a motion for item 6C as written?
I move.
I'll second it.
Great. Thank you. Any questions or discussion?
I have a question, Peter. If you can go back to was that the insertion valve, the picture of it? In the pictures you have?
Yeah.
Was that one of the insertion valves?
I believe it was.
Okay. So you guys installed 91 of them.
Yeah. So is that correct? Yes.
That's
okay.
correct.
So that is an insertion valve. So essentially how those are put on is that's a live line. And so typically when we replace a valve, what we'll do is we'll shut off the line upstream and downstream.
Yeah.
We'll depressurize it,
yeah.
and then we'll cut it, and then we'll put new. Those are less expensive to put in, and we still put in a lot that way. But when we're working on these critical live pressure lines, that's what we're installing, and so that's where we put 91 of those in, and it's really helped us in terms of a system control. That we haven't had in a long time. Well,
thank you.
In decades.
Any further questions for Peter?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just a couple questions here. So I think the cost of copper, I think you had 240,000.
Yeah, that was the
In there?
increase. That was the increased amount. Yep.
I'm just curious because I think the date in there was through December 2026. So did you negotiate the cost of that, or are we expecting to see additional cost from those materials? I'm assuming there's just not a ton of copper sitting out somewhere waiting for this project through 2026 to.
So my understanding, and I'll defer, I'll look to Hazen to confirm this. My understanding is that this is the one time that they're asking for a cost-related increase due to the cost of copper. How they mitigate that is, I think they pre-buy it in bulk
They
to the
do
point
pre-buy
where,
it.
yeah.
Okay.
So they have a lot of it on hand,
Okay.
and so by being able to buy it at this pricing, it should lock in our pricing.
Okay.
I don't
Excellent.
expect an additional cost, and
Mhm.
if they bring it to us, they're going to have to justify it in a way that.
Sure. Yep. And I fully understand the cost of things going up.
Yep.
I just have to go to the grocery store to figure that out. The other thing that I had, and it wasn't part of this presentation, but I am curious about it. So I did have my line replaced in my home, and I got a mailer saying that a testing kit was available to come pick that up here. I would pay for it, and then that, as long as I turn it back in to get my water tested, because I was part of the service line replacement, that I would get like $25 credit on my bill or something like that. As you can tell, I haven't done it yet. But my question is, where are those costs within this program for the testing kits, and how does that work? And then also, have we received any results? Like, I mean, I'm assuming things are coming back and looking very positive for, obviously, the expense that we're putting out there.
This is where I'm actually going to turn to Steve Price with Hazen, our program manager.
Come on down.
or Jasmine Gamboa,
thank
who can address those questions. Thank you, Jasmine.
Yeah, of course.
Can you just hit the button in the middle there? Yep.
Okay. To answer your first question, yes, we make that offer to everyone who gets a service line replaced. We've gotten less than 10 people who have come pick up a kit, done the test, and returned it. All of them have had non-detect lead levels, which is what we expect to see and are happy to see it. And then I actually don't know the answer as to where that portion of the funding is, but we pay, or we give credit on the water bill for both the shipping costs and the test itself, that customer's water bill.
Yeah, and this is actually something I can verify with Sarah. She would know this, but I believe it's the program cost still at that point in time. But we can verify it. But it sounds like we're at $250 so far.
There we go. Yeah, and I guess my question, I think where I was going with that is to ask, is that a Hazen expense? Is that part of the additional 1.3 that we're approving? Or is that, like you said, part of the program costs with the city? Just trying to figure out like where that is, but it sounds like maybe it's a Sarah question.
Yeah, and Sarah's out on vacation this week. Otherwise, she'd
how
be
dare
here
her.
too. I know. But I can verify that for you. I think either way, it is a cost that we'll cover, whether it falls under the Hazen cost or not. And I just don't know the answer to that right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine.
All right, we've already had the motion made and seconded, so can I go ahead and ask for a vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. Peter, I think we stay with you, just recognizing the time. If we can speed through it, that'd be good.
Absolutely. Yeah, those other ones were more, I think, a little bit more complicated than this one. And you get me all night because this is what happens when, Sarah goes
Sarah's
on
not
vacation. Yeah, so so sorry. Okay, so this is Union Avenue water line replacement, phase 1. And so the Union Avenue line is it's right near the waste management facility. We get a significant number of breaks on this line over the years, and so we've had 22 line breaks over the last 20 years. It is a high priority transmission main that feeds water to the western part of our system. And so we have identified the first set of phases of replacing that line to help to stay ahead of the work that Public Works is going to do on the topside street aspect of it. So you can see the scope here. This is the area where we've experienced the most significant number of breaks. So the plan is to install just under 600 feet of water main along Union Ave between South Platte River and Waste Management. That's the scope of this. And as we have funding and we assess priorities of major transmission mains, we may bring another phase of this to Water and Sewer Board and Council, but we also have our Bellevue line that is a significant line. We have the Clarkson line, which is a significant line. So we address what we think are the most critical needs first, and then as funding allows, we'll go to the next critical need. And so that sometimes means we'll do multiple phases on a project like this. But this is definitely the most critical need, and it stays ahead of any topside work that the Public Works wants to do. So our recommendation is to work with CNL, which is one of our on-call contractors, for a contract approval amount of $650,000 to do that reach of line. Staff managed contingency of $65,000 for total project authorization of $715,000.
Let's go ahead and do a motion in a second, and then we'll get our discussion. So can I get a motion for item 6D as written?
I move the motion. Oh, it's on.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Second. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, opposed? All right, motion carries. We're moving on. No old business, so we're moving on to number 8, staff's choice.
Just checking my agenda here. I don't believe we have anything. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. We do. So just an update. The Stormwater Enterprise Fund has been managed by Public Works for approximately the last 5.5 years. And 3 weeks ago, the Stormwater Enterprise Fund was reorganized back under utilities. So the Stormwater Utility and Enterprise for several decades was a part of utilities as a whole. Back in 2020, when we restructured and I became director of both South Platte Renew and the water utility, the Stormwater Fund moved under the Public Works Department, and it's been housed there for the last 5.5 years. Recently, it was determined that after being there for a while, there's just more cost efficiency because pipes are pipes, and being able to you get the efficiency by having all 3 utilities. This is very common across not just the state, but across the country, where a lot of utilities are focusing on this one water approach to water, which is stormwater, wastewater, and drinking water. And so this just brings that stormwater into that overall utility approach and puts it back where it was originally housed. This also means that some of that awkwardness that's occurred over the last few years, where the one time the board would comment on the stormwater fund was during the budget period, and then for the rest of the year wouldn't see any of the actual projects that came through. That changes now, so all of the stormwater related work will come through this board and to council. And so that we've moved the staff. We're working on moving the enterprise fund responsibility. The first step that Sarah and staff are working on is building the same kind of long-term financial model that we've shown you for the water and the sewer fund. We're going to do the same thing for the stormwater enterprise fund to help bring some stability long-term to that fund as well. So that's just the update, that you'll start hearing more topics around stormwater as part of the water sewer board.
Great, thank you. That makes sense. Well, I'll just go on to board members' choice, including if you've got any questions for Peter. Does the board want to raise anything? All right. Then with that, I'll declare the meeting adjourned and everyone have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Board.
Peter, do you know when the result of the surveys will